Welcome in. I'm Matt Norlander. This is the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're listening, well, welcome back in, obviously. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. And if you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. That thing is taking off on a rocket as we get into March. So thank you to everyone who has done that. We've heard plenty of feedback from people who listen to the podcast, but they want to support the show, so they simply subscribe to the show, even though they almost never watch it. If that applies to you, please do so. And please help us out. If you're watching this as it posts on YouTube or at some point after, hit the like button. Feel free to leave some comments. We are going to do some bonus material here. Obviously, if you're listening to this on Monday, you'll notice this is a little outside the schedule. We are going to give you 6 conference tournament preview podcasts. Keep these about 15 to 20 minutes. As you can see, if you are watching, and as you'll hear momentarily if you are listening, we are varying up the roster. So Parrish and I are going to do a couple of these together. I'm going to do one with David Cobb. On this episode, I'll do one with Kyle Boone, and then Parrish will do some with Cobb and Boone. We'll keep it fresh, different voices. That's the idea. Plus, frankly, Parrish and I now only have to do 4 of these instead of 6 altogether. We are going to start with the Big East. So this is the first of the 6. We'll get these into the feed basically throughout Monday and Tuesday, I believe, is the plan, because, you know, these big conference tournaments, they're going to start Wednesday. So, yes, we're doing Big East, ACC, Big 10, Pac-12, SEC, and what one am I forgetting in there? Don't know. Can't remember it off the top of my head. So, Cobb, thanks for joining us. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, man. Quite an insult to the Big East. A potential 6-team bid in league in the NCAA tournament that you have me on instead of Gary. If I were the Big East, I would be offended.
No. You're getting in here to specifically because I want to get you outside of the comfort zone, so to speak. Let's get you talking about teams that you don't necessarily always talk about or always write about. So I wanted to bring you in here. So,
Cobb, I will say,
yes,
I had to do my homework a little bit because, look, I mean, in some ways, the Big East does fly a little bit under my radar as somebody who's primarily lived in the Southeast and covered, you know, things from a Southeastern perspective. The Big East is not as natural to me as, say, the ACC, the SEC, even the Big Ten. So it's fun. That's the beauty of this job, is that when you do things on a national level, it forces you to learn things about programs and conferences, coaches and players that, you know, you may not be as familiar with.
Absolutely. So we're going to do that for everyone listening as well. If this is a crash course, if you found the Eye on College Basketball Podcast in recent episodes and this is up your alley, we hope it is. Again, these will be relatively quick episodes, but just quick primers. Get you going, get you in gear for conference tournament season. The Big East tournament will be held Wednesday through Saturday of this week. And as always, Madison Square Garden is the host venue. The title game will air Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So again, Wednesday through Saturday. Wednesday is the first round. Thursday, we get into the quarterfinals. I will be on hand in New York City for both the Big East and ACC tournaments. I'll be ping-ponging back and forth. And so there we go. The Big East first team has been announced. It's a 6-man first team. I got issues with these conferences. They can't stick this to 5 people, but whatever. Here's the players to know, at least evaluated and said to be the best in the conference this year. RJ Cole, Uconn. Adama Sanogo of Uconn. Cole's a guard. Sanogo's big. Justin Lewis, sophomore, terrific wing, really broke out in a significant way. Julian Champagny of St. John's, big-time player. Jared Rhoden of Seton Hall, kind of an overlooked gem, although Pirates fans know what I'm talking about. And then Colin Gillespie, no surprise, preseason player of the year. He was the only unanimous vote for the Big East first team, Colin Gillespie. As we record this, the Big East has not yet announced his player of the year. It's going to be Gillespie. He's the only unanimous. He's the only pick. It will be Colin Gillespie. You heard it here first, I guess. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to give you a couple storylines to know before we, talk about teams on the bubble, who could be a bid thief, and make our picks. So without further ado, Mr. Cobb, to you, and I got some more to get to, but to you, big picture, what's the biggest storyline attached to the Big East tournament in your opinion?
It might become Patrick Ewing again because just because of the name, right? And because of the fact that they made a run last season. So if heaven forbid they were to win a game, he becomes the biggest story. And let's be honest, does anybody know what's going on there right now? Because it was about a week, 10 days ago that the AD and the administration kind of came out in support of Patrick Ewing. And then he muddies the waters the other day by putting out a somewhat contradictory statement that sort of makes it ambiguous again about whether or not he plans to continue on into the future. Because of the star power there, he's going to become a huge storyline in this tournament. Now, I'm very optimistic that the actual on-court play, as as it typically does in the Big East tournament, will provide us with an unending stream of quality stories. But just looking at it on the surface, the uncertainty around Patrick Ewing, and given what Georgetown did last season, I think that's going to be something that gets talked about a lot surrounding this tournament.
You're absolutely right. Patrick Ewing was on my list of biggest storylines. Here's what Patrick Ewing tweeted out on on Friday. He said, "Any announcement about my future will come from me or Georgetown University. First and foremost, I am not a quitter. My plan is to be back next year coaching at my alma mater and bringing this program back to prominence." So you've got Ewing for a second time stating that he's not going anywhere. You had the AD, put out the vote of confidence. Now, the context on this is John Feinstein, Washington Post writer who has covered college basketball for 3+ decades. He goes on the radio. Apparently, I didn't hear the segment. I actually heard about this when I was down in Durham at Duke, and then this Ewing tweet caught my eye, and then I just hit up someone. They said, yeah, Feinstein went on the radio and kind of spoke aloud a rumor saying, maybe Patrick Ewing would be stepping down despite the vote of confidence and all that. So then it gets swirling even more. Georgetown's 0-19, and so there we have it. Georgetown, of course, won the Big East tournament auto bid a season ago from the 8 line. I will remind you, no fans in the building. Georgetown as an 8 seed makes the run. It was an awesome story when it happened. They promptly got booted right out of the tournament by 5th seed Colorado. That will be a big one. Let me toss 3 more on you storylines, Cobb, and then go where with it where you please. Number 1 to me has to be Uconn returning to the nest. Okay. The Connecticut Huskies going back to the Big East tournament with fans for the first time in almost a decade. Of course, Uconn was in this tournament a year ago. The general public wasn't allowed in the building. It is going to be insane. The Madison Square Garden in the Big East, it always delivers, but getting that program back in that building, it's going to be a joke. There are so many great fan bases in the Big East that really eat up those tickets and descend upon Midtown Manhattan. And I hear you, Providence fans, you got your teams a 1 seed. Nova, absolutely. You're going to flood that place. Not to mention Seton Hall, you roll hard. I get it. Johnny's, you're right there in the city. I get it. No one is competing with UConn's fan contingent at this year's tournament.
Let's point out the fact, though, that, Matt, they have a very tough path in this bracket because they split with Seton Hall, and unless Patrick Ewing pulls a Patrick Ewing and beats Seton Hall in the first round, then UConn will play Seton Hall, who they split with in 2 very close games in the quarterfinal round, and then presumably in the semifinals would have to go up against Villanova. So UConn would have to beat Seton Hall, Villanova, and potentially Providence to win the Big East tournament. To me, that seems highly unlikely.
It could, and we will pick. Cobb's tipping his hand here. We will pick our teams to make it into the title game and then the ultimate winner and all that stuff in just a few minutes. But regardless of that, first game, Cobb, quarterfinals, it's just going to be a madhouse. I plan on being in the building when we do that. If you're watching on YouTube, Ncaa has brought up the bracket there. Again, we'll talk our way through this in just a second, but you can keep that up for everyone watching to get a sense of how the bracket will play out in terms of, okay, if I'm a Butler fan, when do they play? If they were to, move on and play, where would they go? Same thing with Marquette. What am I looking at? So you can go see that there. Of course, other storylines, Providence versus everybody. And by that, I mean, if you look at that bracket, Providence is the 1 seed, wins the regular season in the Big East for the first time in school history, but does so because it does not play 3 league games. Why doesn't it play 3 league games? Because they were COVID cancellations that could not be made up because the Big East decided that the other games that would have been made up, you would have had to pluck from other teams. Ultimately, they decided not to do that. So PC won on win percentage, even though it got swept by the 2 seed Villanova. And so now, Friar fans are going to show up rowdy and boastful. I get it. I cannot wait. They're going to show up with also something. There's going to be something to prove there for Providence. Because
Matt, let me ask you, hey, you
yes.
live in the geographic footprint of this conference.
Indeed.
I don't sense that there's been the outrage over the win percentage champion with Providence this year that there was with the Big Ten and the AAC last year, where those were like seriously contentious issues in the sport of college basketball due to some of the COVID cancellations, creating conference champions who had fewer wins than second place teams. I haven't sensed the sport-wide angst over that with the Big East.
It's close. It's not as much, I would say, as those 2 leagues from a season ago, but it's pretty close because even though we were still playing this season in the pandemic, there weren't as many scheduling issues aside from that, 3-week burst with Omicron. And so, there's been noise from Uconn and Villanova's fan base. There's no doubt about it. Again, part of that's me living in the footprint there. But Providence in the number 1 spot, man, never been in that spot in this tournament before. It'll be interesting to see. And then the last storyline before we talk about teams on the bubble is Villanova, is it still their league? Providence is the 1 seed. UConn's back and going to have fans there, and there's going to be a lot of energy and attention paid to that. But Villanova has the player of the year, still the best program in the conference right now. Is it going to be able to win yet another Big East tournament? It's effectively owned the league since the Catholic Seven split off and redefine what Big East basketball meant. So those are the biggest storylines in addition to what Cobb mentioned there with Georgetown. Okay, teams on the bubble, Cobb. Rapid fire here. Here's the deal. If you're the Big East, it's been a good season. Providence, Nova, Uconn, Seton Hall, Marquette, and Creighton, they're all safe. Creighton and Marquette are going to play each other in the first round, as you can see on the graphic on YouTube. That's a 4-5 matchup that'll kick off on, I say kick off, it will actually technically tip off on Thursday. That means the only team that kind of quasi, maybe barely, I don't even think so, is on the bubble is Xavier. Give me your thoughts on Xavier. It's got that game against Butler in the first. It's going to be the first game of the tournament. 9 seeded Butler, nowhere near the NIT, going up against Xavier. If X loses that game, do you think it's at large case is dicey, or do you think this team's in no matter what?
I mean, I think its case should be dicey because I don't like teams getting in that have played their worst basketball leading up to Selection Sunday. And that's the reality with Xavier. Aside from a win over Georgetown, which really counts for nothing, this is a team that's been on a pretty horrendous slide as of late. And going up against a Butler team in the first round that isn't going to do them a whole lot of good to win that game either, because we'll see. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head where Butler is in the net, so not sure what sort of quadrant that game would be, but it's
128, just so you know. I got you real quick. Butler is 128 in the net. On a neutral court, 128 in the net is a quad 3 game.
There you go. And then do we think they're going to beat Providence in the quarterfinals? I don't see it. I don't see Xavier really helping its case much in this conference tournament. Now, they're on the bubble, so a lot of it's going to depend on what happens elsewhere around the country. The week is off to a good start for bubble teams, obviously with Murray State taking care of business in the OVC final, but there's a lot of dominoes still to fall there. And so I just feel like Xavier is going to end up needing some help if it's going to get into the NCAA.
Cobb might be onto something here. There's going to be Xavier fans that listen to this that disagree. There's going to be ticked off Xavier fans who are almost nodding in agreement because they're just absolutely, they're furious over the fact that this was a preseason top 25 level team and they faded again down the stretch under Travis Steele. But here's the deal right now with Xavier. I'll be quick on this. Best team sheet metric as we record this on a Sunday night, it's actually the net, 35. Now that's decent. Don't get me wrong, but results-based metrics not helping them. Strength of record 53, KPIs 39, predictives kind of all over the board here. Ken Palm says Xavier's number 51 in the country. BPI's at 49. Sagarin's a little bit healthier at 39. A loss to Butler would get it really dicey. I do want to pick up on one thing Cobb said, and I'm not saying that you were alluding to this specifically. You were more speaking to your personal taste when it gets to evaluating tournament teams. Reminder, because I actually had 2 coaches in the past week kind of hit me up and talk to me about this thing, thinking that it was still a criterion, and it's not. How you play down the stretch of the season has no impact on if you get in and where you get seated. Once upon a time, your final 10 games was a criterion, but that's not been the case for well over a decade there. So if a team loses 7 out of 10, 8 out of 9, 4 out of 6 down the stretch, it does not matter. But I do think for some committee members, it's hard to separate what they're seeing in front of their eyes and balancing.
I was going to say, when you get the human nature element of this involved, and let's say hypothetically, it comes down to Xavier or Rutgers. How do you pick Xavier over Rutgers, given what Rutgers accomplished during the Big Ten and the way it turned things on in the second half of the season?
You can't, but with you saying that, how about this, man? It's just so fascinating. And obviously we'll go deeper on Rutgers on the Big Ten preview. Right now, but we're recording this. Yeah, well, they're still pretty good. Rutgers is 76 in the net. It doesn't have a team sheet metric better than 50th. But objectively, Rutgers has to be considered safer than Xavier, in my opinion. But I think that these things, debate one team versus the other, I think it's a wonderful thing for the committee, a great challenge to put forth in front of them, because we are going to get real evidence here this year of how the committee is going to handle and grasp teams that either have drastically different metrics, one versus the other. Loyola Chicago springs to mind. Not good in resume based, really good in predictives. We've heard that tune before. And a Rutgers versus a Xavier is another one to keep in mind there. I think if Xavier beats Butler, I'm saying they're in. I think it's in, but the metrics aren't wonderful, and I don't know if it's a surefire deal. Certainly something to keep an eye on.
Well, to be clear, it's a very thin line because you're talking about a Xavier team that took Providence to triple overtime. So to suggest that this team is incapable of beating Providence is ridiculous. Clearly that they could do that. And so I'm not ruling out the possibility that they go and upset the number 1 seed the day after beating Butler in the first round. It's certainly possible. I just don't see how a win over Butler and that being it really helps a team that's struggled a lot down the stretch. And then I do wonder if the human nature element of what that committee will be going through next week plays a factor in the way they are evaluated. So I guess I'm the devil's advocate here a little bit, but it's certainly possible because the line here is so thin, and this is a Xavier team that has shown flashes. So I'm not ruling out that the Musketeers, I think they are capable of going on a run this month, but there's been no signs of that capability in recent weeks.
5-9 in quad 1, 4-2 in quad 2. That combines for a 9-11 quad 1, quad 2 overall mark. Not great, but not far from horrible. 5-1 in quad 3. Only 4 quad 4 games for Xavier, which is actually helping their net metric overall. Keep an eye out for that. Okay, bid thieves. The teams that have no shot at bubble status. The schools that apply here: St. John's, Butler, DePaul, and Georgetown. Who's the bid thief there? If you got to pick one, and we do got to pick one, I think it's obvious. I go the Johnnies. I think you got to be on that train with me.
Well, I mean, I love Posh Alexander.
Yes.
My guy, sub 6-footer, 9 assists, 0 points in his last game. I think he'll be hungry to get in the score column this week, and the type of a guy who honestly could easily become a darling of March because of his undersized nature and his defensive tenacity. He's sort of a made for March superstar who I hope at some point in his college career gets to shine on the NCAA tournament stage. I will actually go Butler, though, just to be different, because you're talking about a veteran-laden team in Butler and a team that I think, they could maybe upset Providence. They played them close twice during the regular season. Providence is not invincible, and they've rated very highly in the luck category this year. They won a ton of close games, so I like the idea of Butler being a veteran-laden team, a team playing for a coach who played at Butler, who might rally his guys for the postseason. I don't know. I just see some potential March type of substance there with Butler, even though it really hasn't shown up much for them this season. They don't have a star on their team, which is why I think they're going to get overlooked. I mean, there's nobody on that roster who averages more than 11 points a game. But if somebody decides to flash or pop randomly this week, they could be a team that I could see getting on a heater, kind of like Georgetown did last season.
You're out of your mind. Butler's lost 5 in a row, and they're not going to do this. But I appreciate the take there.
I'm trying.
I know. No, yeah, listen, it's the Johnnies. It's the Johnnies, only the Johnnies. Big East is not going to have a bid thief, though. That's not going to happen here. All right, we're going to get out of here on this. Let's pick the title game matchup and tourney winner. Nada, if you could be so kind, if it's still there, bring that bracket back up so if people are watching, they can see it in real time. Pick our title game matchup, and then who's going to win the tourney mop. I will go first because I already got it here. I actually think we're going to get some noise. Okay. I talk about a team we haven't mentioned yet. I'm going to put into the title game. Give me Shaka Smart's Marquette team. So I'm going to have Marquette beating Creighton. A great one against Providence. Providence is going to lose a close game by 4 points for like the second time all season or whatever, and get into the title game. And then you know what? I'm going against what you mentioned at the top, Cobb. I'm going to have Nova and Uconn in the semis. Just a classic Friday night Big East semi. Just a classic. Those fans, oh my gosh, give it to me. And I'll have Uconn winning. And it's return with fans to the Garden, long awaited, well overdue. So I'll have Marquette versus Uconn in the Big East tournament championship game, and then give me Uconn. It's got more talent. It's a better defensive team. I think it's a bit more reliable. Marquette had some really nice moments, but it has been more wobbly as of late. I think Shaka Smart's going to do well for himself in this spot overall. I think that is not out of the realm of possibility. Golden Eagles are 19-11. They've been up, down, up, down, up, down in the past 2.5 weeks or so. They've had a loss and a win, a loss, win, loss, win over their past 6 games. But I'm going to say they're going to get on track. Uconn wins the Big East tournament. RJ Cole is the most outstanding player. Who do you got, Cobb?
Yeah, I'm going Nova. This is a team that nationally has been slept on since they lost some of their marquee non-conference games early on. So they dropped games against UCLA, Purdue, Baylor. They did beat Tennessee, but it's a team that kind of fell off the national radar in some respects because of the fact that it didn't have a strong showing early in the season, as it was navigating some injury and depth problems, mind you. So a little bit of a deeper team now that at least I think is in better position to soldier the postseason than it was to soldier November. And a team that is coached by Jay Wright, a team that has gone on the road and beaten some good teams in this league. So I will go Villanova to win it all. I'm having a hard time deciding who I really believe is they're going to meet in the title game, though. I think at the end of the day, I go Providence because of just a tip of the cap and some respect on that Friars team and what Ed Cooley and that squad have accomplished this season. I caught some flack a couple months ago for leaving Al Durham off my midseason top transfers list. In reality, he was just off the list, right on the brink, and certainly had a case to be in the top 20. He wasn't in the top 20, though, because the statistics don't match the reality with Al Durham. And so from a metric standpoint, he embodies Providence. The metrics are not there with Providence. The metrics do not back up Providence being a team that can have a great March. But the metrics don't account for the way that Al Durham seems to always get to the free throw line in the clutch moments of big games. And so I think he's a made for March type of player. And I think that's going to prove itself in this tournament. And you look at the fact, if they get past their quarterfinal game, they're going up against potentially a Creighton team that's going to be without Ryan Nembhard, their point guard. And I think that makes their path a little bit easier. And it could be Marquette they meet in the semifinals. But ultimately, I think I see Villanova beating Providence in the finals in what would be a phenomenal third game between those two teams.
And I assume you go Gillespie, MOP, if that's the case, Nova winning, or anyone else on that roster?
I think Justin Moore could very easily be the most outstanding player as well. It just depends on who has the hot hand for that team. Shoot, Jermaine Samuels could put together 3 consecutive double-doubles. I mean, they've got 3 really, really good veteran players in those 3 guys who I think will take turns this month being the guy who leads Villanova.
2 quick notes on teams that we didn't talk about that are going to play a factor in this. Just, that we didn't talk about much. Seton Hall 20-9. Jared Rhoden's a really good player. And this team isn't fully healthy, but it's won 5 in a row heading into the tournament. Seton Hall is the true dark horse in this one. And then you mentioned Nembhard at Creighton. Creighton to even be in the tournament, it's going to the NCAA tournament. It's safely no matter what happens here. Greg McDermott's done a wonderful job. Blue Jays are not high on the metrics, but they're 20-10. They've certainly done enough to get in. I don't think you got anything to worry about if you're a Creighton fan. And this tournament will have some of its surprises. It normally does. It usually provides that overall. I was there 8 years ago. It must have been 8 years ago when Providence won the tournament. Ed Cooley gets him into the big dance because of it. I'm almost positive Providence was like an NIT team before, and then they run the table and they win it. And that's one of my favorite Big East tournament memories. So we could have something like that. All I'm asking is I want, for the sake of just being there to cover this, either get me Providence or Uconn, one of those 2. I don't need both of them, but one of those 2 in the title game, purely for, because again, Nova fans are going to show up in huge force. Seton Hall, everyone. But I'm telling you, Providence and Uconn will drive up the secondary market of ticket prices. Not quite at Coach K final game level, but you get what I'm saying there. Being in the region, it's Uconn is really going to bring this tournament to another level and kind of get everyone even closer together than the Big East tournament had already been in recent years when it had been just fine despite the conference fracturing. Any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I want to know why you're sleeping on the Friars. What is it about Providence? What have they not shown you over the last 2-3 months that makes you kind of doubt them?
I'm not. It's not me sleeping at all. I don't think we're gonna get a chalky Big East. That's purely it. I'm in on Providence. I've had them in my power rankings almost the entire season. I think that Providence is better than its metrics right now. And Ed Cooley, I would have top 3 for National Coach of the Year at this point. Its only loss is neutral to Virginia, got rolled. at Marquette got steamrolled, and then they got swept in 2 games against Villanova. That's it. Really good team. I think Jared Bynum is a top 10 to 15 defender in the country. Nate Watson, second team All Big East, a little bit undervalued. You mentioned Durham overall. Excuse me, Justin Minaya, top 10 to 15 defender. I was looking at Bynum's name when I was meant to say Minaya. And then Bynum's a really, really great shooter. Like they've got a lot there. So Providence can win the Big East tournament, but I'm going to take a chance. Give me Uconn over Marquette. And there we have it. All right, Cobb, we're getting out of here. I'm trying to keep this tight. I wanted that 20. We're at 25. Gosh, how long is your podcast with Parrish going to go? Over under 30 minutes. Can you keep it under
SEC?
30?
Are we SEC?
I think you might be. I think the SEC might be you and Parrish. You'll have to wait for it to publish on YouTube and in the feed later this week to find out. Yeah, will see.
We're both in that geographic footprint, so it could go a while.
Could be a little long. But thank you to everyone for watching and or listening, continuing to subscribe. We got plenty more of this stuff coming your way. We want to keep your podcast feed active throughout the month of March, keep you updated on all the news, some good discussion points. Hopefully this, gets you even more excited for the games. So for David Cobb, I'm Matt Norlander. You'll probably have another one of these episodes literally in your feed right now. Go listen to that.